Welcome to the Miscellaneous Film Festival, the podcast for curiously curated films. I'm Jacin, and this week we're discussing film adaptations of famous books. With me is Elise Schumock, the proprietor of the Rose City Book Pub, literally the most literary bar in the world and one of my favorite places to hang out in Portland. Hello, Elise.
Hi, Jacin.
I really love your bar. It
Thank
literally is one of my favorite places to go to Portland. It is a default date night, basically so I can show off that I can read.
It's a really good first date night, and especially like internet or blind date, because
Oh, yeah?
well, a couple of things. One is if you bring someone and they don't get it,
Mm-hmm.
they will not get you just right away. It's a weeding out class, and
Oh, okay.
I have seen people bring someone there and they're like, I don't get it. Oh, it's like crowded and cluttered. It's like, no, it's cozy. And
It
then
is.
Yeah. And the crowded and cluttered means that you're allowed to put your feet on the furniture. And then the other thing is my staff are actively trained and authorized to intervene if they see something that doesn't look safe.
Awesome. That's wonderful.
And so I really do encourage women, especially, to choose it as their first date place.
One of the things I would say to characterize the book pub is that's the place you would take Belle from Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she'd like that date. Yeah. Yeah. She's going to put herself in a cubby and she'll have
Right.
this pack and she'll have some tea.
So how did the idea for the book pub come to place? I always imagined that you were bitten by a radioactive bookworm who had been bitten by a barfly.
I love it. I lived in Los Angeles for a long time. I'm from Portland originally.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend that I met at a bar, and it was not the kind of bar where you would normally be reading. And he one day said, wouldn't it be cool if there was a bookstore that was a bar? And I was like, whoa, that would be cool. And that would be in Portland. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going home soon.
Uh-huh.
I gave myself a 3-year timeline to return home. So it was 2015, and I said I'll return at the end of school year of 2018, and I'm doing it.
That's
Yeah.
such a sweet story.
Yeah,
And you guys do all kinds of events there. You
tons.
describe it, and I absolutely agree. That's the selling point of the Rose City Book Pub. It is cozy. It is a place to sit and read and enjoy a drink. And when I go there, I'm amazed how quiet it is because you don't play loud music. You don't have sports blaring up in the corner.
Yeah.
Folks are genuinely reading, listening to music on headphones. It's a place to have some peace and quiet and some solitude. But you do have like comedy nights and trivia nights, right?
Yeah, we've got trivia, lots and lots of live music, but like you're saying, it's not loud music kind of place, right?
Mhm.
So the music we have tends to be bluegrass, Americana, and then there's also sort of groups that meet there that are public open groups. So there's a correspondence club where the host brings greeting cards and postcards and also postage, and then encourages people to write snail mail and actually send it to people. And that's once a month. And then there's one called Procrastinators Club, which is right. You get it. It's like bring your computer or whatever the thing is that you need a little social support to get you to do it. And then I think there's a stitch and bitch, like, sort of like knitting and, any handwork, and just all these kinds of things where people have said, hey, can we reserve a table once a month to do this thing, or once a week?
So obviously you're a big fan of books. You're a big fan of reading. Actually, every time I've been to the book pub and found you there, you're just sitting at the bar in the middle of a book. And I always feel bad coming to say hi because you're reading, and you don't do that when someone's reading.
Yeah. Well, or I'm at the computer doing boring business things.
Well, that's also because of this fun idea and this beautiful bar you've created. I wanted to invite you onto the show to talk about movies that were adapted from famous books. And you picked 5, 4 of which I hadn't seen before. You picked Being There from 1979, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie from 1969, Simon Birch from 1998, Revolutionary Road from 2008, and The Fault in Our Stars from 2014. And like I said, I had seen Being There, but I hadn't seen the others. So this was a treat for me to get to see this.
That's the one you'd seen. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh well.
Because it's a
As,
little obscure. Are you into Hal Ashby?
no, I was a goofy comedy
Oh.
enthusiast as a kid. So Peter Sellers, this is going to be hilarious. And as a high school kid, I, understood all of the subtext of being there.
Uh, yeah, it's a departure from his other work.
I was going to talk to you about the idea of adapting books to film. Because along with being into theater and comedy when I was a kid, I was a huge book nerd. I consumed books constantly. I was definitely the kid who was hanging out in the library wishing I could drink. So thank you for that, making that dream come true.
Yeah, we got you now.
Yeah. But I was also the kid who went to the movies and would just be mortified when it wasn't exactly like the book.
Yeah, it can be very upsetting when it's a book that you're too close to.
Right.
And
Right.
children in particular often feel very close to their books.
Mhm.
And I've found I'm less horrified with the casting not being what I wanted or that sort of thing as an adult. Have you found that?
Yes, that's definitely changed for me.
And I think it's because of a couple of things. I think our theory of mind has gotten better.
What is
As a
that?
kid. So, like, recognizing that other people don't know or think what you know and think.
Oh,
And
yeah.
as a kid, you're like, well, that's not what Ramona Quimby looks like. And
Yeah.
that's not how I would have chosen her. That's not what she looks like.
Yeah, I saw her completely live
Yeah.
and
I
in my
knew.
mind.
So that kind of thing. I was so upset by those things. But then as an adult, I see it and I'm like, okay, that's good casting. And every once in a while I'll be like, no, you got that wrong. But it's not nearly as personal because I can understand that other people are maybe making their choices. But yes, as a kid, I was so pissed. So pissed when they did it wrong. Yeah.
What as a movie nerd, what has sort of changed my ability to accept adaptations has been understanding how a visual medium like movies just can't do some of the narrative things that a book can. They can't, unless you have a narrator in the movie telling you what everyone's thinking and feeling, which kind of takes away from the dramatic performances of actors. You don't get the same feeling. I was really impressed going back and forth between watching and reading Fight Club, that it being such a first person narrative kind of book and the
Yeah.
movie following the exact same way. I really got the same feeling watching and reading that from that one. But for others, I've learned to give them a little bit of grace, saying there's no way they could have visualized that, so they did something else to sort of represent, or what was in the book was very meaningful, but it was very small and wouldn't have looked as dynamic on screen, so they beefed it up or switched it out to something more dramatic.
Yeah, and something like Fight Club, that was a brilliant thing that they did there because part of the point of the first person narrator there is that it was an unreliable narrator.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and it's really tricky to do first person narration in a film, and yet they did.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It just was through his eyes. There's also, have you seen Irreversible? I think it's Gaspard Noé. It's very distressing. It starts with a like a murder scene,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes backwards order. So it's from this one point of view. It's very much, and it's hard to say this, right? But like a first person narrated film. It's
Mm-hmm.
I think we're kind of making that term up, maybe.
Yeah.
But yes, this thing where it's very much from the perspective of a character and you're not getting the omniscience that you normally have in film. And
We are
so,
making it up, and I think what the parameters must be is where you're really relying on what the narration is telling you to
yes,
understand what's going on, instead of an unnarrated film where you have to
right,
pick up all the clues and you get to misunderstand or miss details, whereas with
right.
a narrated one, they're feeding you everything like a book does, everything
Yes,
you're supposed to see like a book does.
Yeah, yeah. And so that one's one also, I think it works best when you're talking about an unreliable narrator. Like Lolita. I feel like when, Lolita, the book is,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's this guy thinking, oh, she just loves me. She's, and it's like, no, you've kidnapped her. She's terrified. And so how do you do that in the movie other than putting it through his point of view and then having the hints, like in the book, the little hints that maybe this point of view might not be accurate.
Right. And then we are, as the audience in that case, without the narrator, are
Mhm.
left in suspense of, wait, what are we watching? And
Yeah, yeah,
should we be imposing our own judgment on this character, or is the film going to tell us what the perspective they want us to have is?
yeah. And honestly, I think that's the great power of the book, Lolita, is that you're going along and you're just buying into his point of view over and over again. And then every once in a while, like, oh my God, how am I rooting for this guy? And and the way that it jerks you around in your response is the point,
Mm-hmm.
is lulling you into going with it. And then some hint makes you say, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
One of the giveaways in my mind, to if you're watching a movie and suddenly start thinking, was this based on a book? Um, really good writing. Oh no, the characters are fleshed out. They have dimensions. They have not just momentum, but motivation, and they want to share thoughts with other people. Like they'll stop and have a conversation and sort of broaden your perspective on how they think, what they feel, instead of just constantly moving forward, going to the next thing.
Right. Like being maybe a little bit more character driven and more introspective
Mm-hmm.
instead of plot driven. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where I could be misled would be like Quentin Tarantino,
Mhm.
because his mouthy characters definitely seem like they were directed by a writer.
Right. And that's when, you've come across some authors who bridge the gap that have, well, Jerzy Kosinski being there, he also
Mm-hmm.
was a screenwriter. He wrote the screenplay as well as the novel.
Yes, he did.
So he wrote his own screenplay adaptation. So he had that sense. And so sometimes, especially after an author has gotten involved in the filmmaking, then on their subsequent works, then they are thinking with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because of course it is a good way to make money from books, is to make a movie. And so
Right.
once, then if you've had your hand in it, then it's going to help shape how they write their next book into something that will be adaptable.
Well, that sounds like a great segue to jump into talking about the movies themselves. Being There was the first one we were going to discuss, from 1979, directed by Hal Ashby, with Peter Sellers, Shirley MacLaine, and Melvin Douglas. It was, like you said, screenwritten by the author himself, Jerry Krasinski. The synopsis for the movie is: it's a simple-minded gardener named Chance who has spent all his life in the Washington, D.C. house where he works. When the owner dies, Chance is put out on the street with no knowledge of the world except what he has learned from television. And television is a big part of the movie. And I got to admit, I have not read any of the books that the movies we're discussing are based on. So I was going to ask you to fill in details. Like, surely, even though TV must be integral to the character, even in the book, not as much as in the movie, where we're watching him watch TV and watching the programs on the TV that he's watching.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, actually, this is the only one I haven't read the book.
Oh,
But
oh,
but I bet you he watches TV in it. I think that that is a big part of the characters, that his experience of the world is artificial.
mm-hmm.
He's clearly got some developmental disability, or some intellectual disability. He's fairly simple, and he's been raised on this property. I think that there's some hint that he might be the illegitimate son of the rich man,
Right.
um, and because otherwise, why would he bring him in? And he's just been given the job of being the gardener.
Well,
And
it seems like they say he was raised there, that he's grown up. The synopsis is that he's never left the house, which made me think, okay, hidden illegitimate kid.
right,
And I
that's
also wonder, like, how has he been there his whole life
Yeah.
How's he
Well,
never, as a kid, wanted to go outside?
but
And
it's this great big estate, and then he's fairly simple, and then
Mhm,
also it's from long enough ago that, and especially because this man would have been rich, that whatever education he got would have been homeschooling,
mhm,
right? Because there wouldn't have been special ed in
right.
schools at the time. There, it would have just been warehousing, and so he lucked out by being raised by a wealthy man, and it sounds like he just had no interest in leaving. And it's a great big estate, so lots to do there, and people come and go.
And to be fair, and correct me if I'm wrong, the impression I got about the movie was that the main character Chance is supposed to be a blank slate. So all of us trying to figure out how he ended up this way, it kind of doesn't matter because we just need him to have ended up this way, so he can be a blank slate for everyone else to project their impressions of the world or their expectations onto.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So he really just needs to be very simple, and so he's simple-minded. And his understanding of the world is through artifice,
Hmm.
through television, and
Hmm.
so he doesn't know the real ways of the world. um and and
So
then
much so that he actually, when he leaves the house, walks out into the street with the clothes on his back, a suitcase, and his TV remote control,
yeah.
and he thinks he can interact with the world with the remote control.
So cute, yeah. So this opening interaction with Shirley MacLaine, right? Somehow she picks him up in a limousine. Oh yeah, like she hits him. Her
She
limousine,
accidentally hits him. Yeah.
yeah, hits him with the limousine, and then she's like, "Oh my goodness!" And then she's like, "And who are you?" And he says, "I'm Chance, the gardener." And she says, "Chauncey Gardner." Uh,
Hmm.
and then something like, "Oh, are you related to the Baltimore gardeners?" And he says something like, "I just tend the garden." Um,
He doesn't say anything. He literally spends the whole movie saying next to nothing except exactly what's on his mind. He is a very dim bulb, and
yeah,
when he does speak, he only talks about what he definitely knows, which is how to garden and
right.
things about gardening.
And then everyone keeps taking these very plain, simple statements like, "I just tend the garden." And then they just imagine
Oh,
that this is some grand metaphor of like, "Oh, you're, all," and he ends up, I mean, it's just so crazy. He ends up on this big random adventure, and he's not causing any of this. He's just getting dragged along. It
failing up, kind of.
Failing up. Yeah.
I kept correlating it to Forrest Gump in a lot of ways.
Yes.
That he
Yeah.
was a less dynamic Forrest Gump.
Yeah. And just like a much blanker slate. And
Mhm,
exactly. He just keeps ending up in situations that are way beyond his, limited capacity, and yet it works. Like he's filling this purpose for people. It's not heavy-handed when you're watching it, but then in trying to discuss it, it's like, "Oh yeah,
mhm.
there's some strong didacticism in here." There
Yes.
is. Like, yes, you can be a real dum dum and end up in high levels of power in America. So Hal Ashby also directed Harold and Maude, which is my
Oh, really?
yeah, and that is
Oh.
my favorite movie of all time forever since I was like 9 years old. And also that one, compared to what we do now, that movie moves slowly, but not nearly as slowly as Being There.
Mhm.
But so Hal Ashby obviously was drawn to quirk.
Right.
That's your through line there. But then Jerzy Kosinski's other most famous book is called The Painted Bird, and it is terrifying. So Kosinski grew up Jewish in Poland,
Oh.
and he was born in 1933, and he and this so I think that he was hidden by some Catholics. Like,
Mhm.
a lot of Jewish kids in particular got sent to Catholic schools and pretended to be Catholic. And but he wrote this book about a sort of vague young man who is wandering vaguely through the forests in Poland during a vaguely terrifying time
Mhm.
that's probably World War II. And encounters terrifying people. This book was so scary that I read the entire thing at work when I worked at a luggage store, and I refused to take it home because I was terrified. The images in it,
Oh, wow.
and also just this idea of a small child fending for themselves when truly there are people who want to murder him, and he's too little to even understand why that would be.
And what's the name of the book again?
So it's called The Painted Bird.
The Painted Bird.
Oh, it's so scary.
Was it written before or after Being There?
Before, I think it's his first book.
Okay, so Being There is almost like a follow-up of doing a similar a similar premise, but with an adult in an adult world.
And safe.
In the world of in the coddling bosom of privilege.
Yes, exactly. It's really so different. And a lot of authors, their stuff ties together pretty clearly, but there are some people that write all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those two books by Kaczynski, they're so randomly just very different experiences. That one is totally worth reading, but I recommend reading it in the daylight.
Got it. The Painted Bird.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, speaking of privilege, the next movie on our list is The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which takes place in a fantastic girls' boarding school in Edinburgh.
Mm-hmm.
It was from 1969, directed by Ronald Neame, and stars Maggie Smith, Robert Stevens, and Pamela Franklin. The synopsis is: a headstrong young teacher in a private school in 1930s Edinburgh ignores the curriculum and influences her impressionable 12-year-old charges with her over-romanticized worldview. And some of the summaries I read for movies leave out all the details. This one sums it up wonderfully. That is exactly what you're stepping into.
Yeah. And it's, we were talking about being mad about the casting in the past. Maggie Smith was perfect for this.
Oh, no. That sentence was too long. Maggie Smith is perfect.
Yes.
Period.
Yes. She could pull off this imperiousness in a way where you fall for it and you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually imperiousness is obnoxious and unlikable, and somehow she is perfect. It had to be her. Plus she's so grand, and she's slender in this way where clothes drape beautifully on her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she needs to be just absolutely pristine, perfect fashion, but classic fashion. And
she's statuesque, and I would call her the perfect distillation of poise.
Yes,
she can just pluck a word, hit an enunciation just right, and charm you right. I mean, that's why she was Professor McGonagall in Harry Potter, because she would just cast spells with her dialogue.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you can tell that her words have power.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and also, she's the kind of person where you think her clothes are never wrinkled. There are these things I sometimes wish I were. I wish I was focused enough and polite enough to pay attention when I'm eating and not spill on my boobs. I
would have found you a classy, very ornate bib, because that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. But it's like, I will never be that person. I'm never going to be the person who is, poised and polite and isn't reading a book while I'm eating. Yes. Yeah. But of course she has stylists, and that's part of it. But also she just clearly was raised right. And it comes through. And so, so she's just so grand for that character. And it's such an interesting character.
And you'll have to tell me what the differences are between the movie and the book.
Okay, they changed little bits of, it's like, those characters, like the things like that, there's two characters turned into one or something like that.
Yeah.
But it is spot on. It's absolutely spot on. And because of the fact that it takes place at a boarding school, it's a very filmable thing. And when you think about the practicalities of filming certain things, right? Like, it's like, yep, this is easy. This is going to be an easy set to build. This is going to be very focused, and and also, like, it's a boarding school, so everyone's got uniforms. This is easily done. You don't have to have
Oh,
a lot of costume changes for the girls.
and what made Maggie Smith as Jean Brodie stand out was that set, their uniforms, that whole movie was so gray and colorless.
And then she's
She just
brand
blooms.
bold.
Yeah.
Yes. And exactly. And so then she gets to be this queen bee that stands out.
Well,
And she gets to have the fashion. And although, of course, the standards would be that, of course, she needs to dress in a certain subdued way. And yet, ooh, she does it in a way that's got a little bit of flash.
rules don't apply to her.
Yeah.
I think that would be one thing that probably an audience would benefit more from the movie than the book,
Mhm.
was seeing Maggie, like we've been fawning over Maggie Smith, but seeing someone that beautiful and poised saying things like, "Oh, we have to look up to Benito Mussolini,
Yes.
Il Duce. He's such a great leader. He is such a great speaker. What he's saying and the politics he's promoting, fascism, his fascistes are, or I don't know how to say that, are exactly how people should be." And the packaging, the presentation coming from Miss Jean Brodie
Yeah.
really draws you in, because she is the radiant, colorful teacher
Yeah.
class in this otherwise gray conformative school. And
And
that
what she's saying is wild. It's clearly so unacceptable, but also her whole vibe is unacceptable. But the other thing is, honestly, in real life, as an adult, and this is what the girls come to find as they grow older, she's the worst.
yeah,
I mean, she's and this is where, Maggie Smith pulls off this beautiful thing that you're so into it. You're with her on this. And not. You also are like, "Oh, this is so sketch and so bad." And then also as an adult, you think, "I would hate to work with this woman." It's like, and I think I read Prime Miss Jean Brodie when I was young, and then I reread it after I'd been teaching, and the book was different. Second read was a different read. I was much, much
well,
irritated with her from the beginning, whereas
you were different. The book was
I
the
was different.
same.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah. And I found her obnoxious from page 1
Mhm.
on the second read. And but Maggie Smith, she had me snowed. Even as a grown-up, I'm like, "Oh, you are quite grand." And you're supposed to feel that way. I think that the goal is for you to feel a little torn.
Mhm. I will say that it wasn't until closer to halfway through the movie where I started saying, "Is Miss Jean Brodie the villain of this movie?" And part of it was the way she was sort of predetermining her selected girls' futures
Yes.
in ways that seemed like, and then finding out that when we meet them, they're only 12 years old. And she's already picking out, "Oh, you are going to have many love affairs. You are going to be a great lover. You
Yes.
are going to find something practical to do. You are too intelligent to be mixed up in anything fun."
Yes.
And
And then she grooms them to be sexually abused by one of the teachers. Um, and then actually this is okay, I am thinking this. This is the really big difference between the book and the movie, is
uh-huh.
that the frame tale in the book is that it's being told from the point of view of one of the girls who grew up to be a nun.
Oh,
Okay. And it is with the negative spin of like, oh,
oh,
this woman said us she groomed us all for our futures, and boy was that wrong.
right.
Yeah.
I actually, it freaked me out enough that she's grooming one particular girl to become the future lover of the art teacher who has been her lover.
Yeah,
Um,
you.
and she's like- and and then it's eventually, by the end of the movie, we see that he has taken one of the girls as a lover. I had to stop and research real quick. That actress was Pamela Franklin.
Mhm.
She was born in February 1950.
Mhm.
The prime of Miss Jean Brodie started filming in April 1968. She
Okay.
was just barely 18 years old.
Yeah. I believe what we call that is barely legal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As an actress,
Yeah.
kissing and making out with a guy in his 50s as acting
and that,
posing nude, and I'm just like,
yeah,
I got so uncomfortable with
yes,
this
yeah.
fucking movie.
And also that's the sort of thing that is, from that era, that people did have young women, very young women, doing some pretty gross things. You've got also like Blue Lagoon and some others, or
And from that era, you mean like the late 60s, 70s,
yeah,
not just the 1930s where this takes place.
right, yeah, that era of filming, they said, but this is professional.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there are some movies that are going to be harder to get made. Some books can't be made into movies anymore because thankfully we care about how, even at 18, we're okay. So the government says that's legal, but boy, that is something to ask of that 18-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a segue into talking about our next movie, Simon Birch. Something that I don't look for in movies is seeing teenagers or young adults exploring their sexuality.
Hmm.
And on one hand, that's just because I'm too old for that now.
Yeah.
One, and that makes it feel inappropriate. Two, I'm too old for that now, and it doesn't interest me. And both of those are kind of a shame as far as appreciating movies with those subject matters, because that age and that experience, those awakenings, are very dramatic
Yeah.
and are very sensational and are make for great stories and make for very dynamic dramas.
Hmm.
And I have to be like, I I will overlook them, and that's why I'm so glad you recommended Simon Birch
Right.
from
Because it has this,
1998.
right. That has this great scene where is this what you're thinking about? He's the baby Jesus in the nativity play.
All right, let's set it up, because
Okay, okay, yeah.
let me explain so much more. So we're talking about Simon Birch from 1998, directed by Mark Steven Johnson. It stars Ashley Judd, Ian Michael Smith, Joseph Mazzello, and Oliver Platt. It's based on the book A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving.
Hmm.
And the synopsis is, it is the misadventures of Simon Birch, an 11-year-old little person whose outsized personality belies his small stature, and his best friend, Joe Wentworth. Ian Michael Smith, this is his one movie credit as Simon Birch, but he is a 12-year-old little person, who, as you were about to say, stars as the baby Jesus in his church's nativity play.
Right. And he's so pissed about it because the Sunday school teacher says, and we're going to have you play the baby Jesus. And he's like, I'm not a baby. I'm the same age as all these people. I'm just small.
Right.
And there's this girl from Sunday school who just thinks he's so adorable. And she's got this kind of mixed up, like, oh, he's so cute, I just want to squish his cheeks. But also she has a crush on him. She makes a move on him when he's baby Jesus, and he just ruins the play.
Wait a minute. We might be
Yeah.
remembering this movie differently.
Oh, I guess I came from the book. Sorry.
Okay. Oh, really? So in the book, it's clear that she has a crush on him, because
Yeah.
it's very clear that he has a crush on her.
Yeah, but she treats him like just this cute little baby, and then he's just like, "Get your damn hands off of me!"
Oh,
Yeah.
in the movie, she's like leaning in as she's playing Mary in the nativity play. She's leaning in to the manger, him being baby Jesus, and all he can think about is his view of her cleavage.
Yes, but so in the book, he's really distressed at her having cleavage, and I think he did have a crush on her, but in this way where it's like, oh, but not actually. Like, remember, I feel like this is why when you're a middle school, you have celebrity crushes.
Oh, they're safe.
Because there's no chance that they will
Yeah.
ever, so you can fantasize about them all you want. And, and Neil Patrick Harris is never going to pop out of Doogie Howser MD and show up at my house, also he's gay. So
wait, what?
Yeah. And so, so you can just like crush on him all you want. And like, but like if someone actually tried something on, you're like, wait, I'm still a child. What are you talking about? And so, so he's like torn with his, like, I'm having puberty feelings, but I don't want to have puberty feelings. And she makes a move and he is like, I don't think so. And But also she was always trying to pick him up like a doll. And
Yeah.
this is also where he's angry that the Sunday school teacher doesn't get it. The other thing with his character is that he is it's an allegory, and he is the Christ figure, but he's not the baby Jesus. He's like so holy, and so his faith is so strong, and this is much bigger in the book.
Hmm.
His faith is so strong that that's where the Sunday school teacher hears him questioning some things, and then she's upset with him, and it's really that his faith is stronger, and his belief is stronger, and all of this, and so he's like ahead of her, and she's this
Oh.
whole rule follower churchgoer. She's like, yeah, you just do, and then on top of that, there she is, think about, doing, being Christ-like, being a good person. That Sunday school teacher is not great.
No.
She doesn't listen to him when he says, I don't want to be the baby Jesus. That's offensive. It's offensive to have
She
dwarfism be the baby. Come on.
Right. She actually casts, and no offense to this kid, the heaviest possible kid to play the angel who's supposed to be on a rope
Yeah.
strung up, and that's what causes the big kerfuffle at the nativity play. He
Yeah.
was the equipment for lifting someone up to play the angel was not equipped for an adult or a young person of that
Right.
weight. And Simon Birch would have been perfect because
Yep.
he's
Yeah,
light.
he's little. Yeah, it would have been perfect. He's the one you put on the top of the pyramid, and um
Well, a couple of things that I found interesting about this movie adapted from a book. One, it does have some narration, and I was blown away to see that it was Jim Carrey
yeah.
as the adult version of Joe, Simon Birch's best friend,
Yes.
just showing up and narrating. And I went, "This is a Jim Carrey movie."
Right. Also, when it came out too, that was early in Jim Carrey being considered not just slapstick comedy.
It came out the same year as the Truman Show.
Yes. And up until then, he had been very much like Dumb and Dumber.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as much as it's goofy now to think of it, it was really unbelievable that Jim got cast in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing too that's really worth noting is so John Irving was upset about this. He thought they did it wrong. And so that's why it's suggested by Irving's novel. So
Yeah.
not inspired by it. And I think he negotiated that phrasing, and also said you cannot use my characters' names.
Yeah, that was a big. We talked about things being changed in adaptations. That was just a startling departure when I saw that it was based on a book called A Prayer for Owen Meany, and then they changed the main character's name. I mean,
Yeah.
where's the
And that is
there's no marketing value if you can't link it to the original book.
right. And the movie that they made is absolutely charming and adorable, and I enjoyed it, but it is, I think, important to consider it not the same as the book, because John Irving was mad about it. The book is also a Vietnam book.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, well, that's how the character dies. Simon Birch.
In the movie, he rescues a whole bunch of little kids from a sinking school bus.
Yeah.
And
And
that does not happen in the book.
And in the book, he dies in Vietnam, and so yeah, and that's the ending thing. So they cut the whole second half of the book. That was part of it, and they also got rid of the Vietnam commentary. Now, on the flip side, this is a 300-something page book.
Okay,
and
something's got to go.
And so you've got to kill something, right? And then so you just keep it in the childhood part, end it during childhood, but then him dying in the book is sort of important.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kill him in a different way, but still they have him saving people, right? Like there's that part.
If I like that, if you're going to take a book and cut half of it out and really switch up a character's arc and ending so much that it's nothing like the book, I think it's a cool thing that's the credits say suggested by the book by John Irving. More movies should probably be labeled suggested by instead of based on.
Yeah, exactly. I think, it's an interesting boundary he laid out. And he's had several other books made into films. Like he's
Mhm.
done very well for himself. Because I was saying before, like that's the big money in books is making a movie.
Yeah.
And John Irving is both prolific. He's written quite a bit, but also several of his books have become movies. And the reason I wanted to talk about this one really was for this this weird exception that the author laid down the law and said not quite. And I think I agree with you. I'd like to see more of that. There's another one in my alternates list, Possession by A.S. Byatt, and it's this incredibly long book. And it's the thing that I don't often like this. I get irritated by this, but it's basically 3 stories intertwined.
Okay.
And I call this the MFA novel, where you go get your master's and you learn how to write short stories, but novels are really where the money is. And so then you write 3 short stories and crisscross them, right? And it's gotten to be that there are way too many with that model. And but A.S. Byatt pulls this off, and it's so long that
Mhm.
it isn't 3 short stories. But the way that they did that adaptation is that they just took one of them out entirely. There were 3
Okay.
strands, and they just said, let's just do 2. Because, how do you turn this 350-page, 3-story book into 1 story? Yeah. And
Oh
so
man.
that movie is still 3 hours long, but, it would have been 9 hours long if they tried to do everything. Um, but that was a really good solution,
Mhm.
and especially, you know, our attention and our interest in being jerked around and hopping around among too many storylines in a movie. Yeah, like it works better in a book.
I kind of had that experience with the next movie we're going to talk about, Revolutionary Road. I didn't realize that was happening sequentially. It
Ah,
it Some of the scenes seemed like maybe they were flashing back. Maybe this was we're getting information ahead of finding the inciting incident that led to where we're going to end up. But and that was just one instance of me kind of being primed to see movies based on books. Like, okay, the narration or the narrative could be different. Um, Visually, some things might need to be repositioned so they make more sense.
yeah. That's funny, like that you're primed for it to be less of a straightforward story. And then it really was just pretty much
No,
straightforward.
it really
Um,
was straightforward and really good.
yeah, it's also some parts of it are kind of episodic. And when I say that, I'm thinking like the Iliad and Odyssey, where
Mhm.
if you swapped the order, it wouldn't. There's not necessarily a progression, and so this scene could have happened before that one, and and there's some things that build over time, but there are some components that just, yeah, that's we did that one first.
Yeah. Uh, the movie we're talking about, Revolutionary Road from 2008, directed by Sam Mendes, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet, and Kathy Bates, which is such a great lineup of
Yeah,
stars, particularly Kathy Bates and Kate Winslet, who I love very much.
yeah,
And the synopsis is a young couple living in 1950s Connecticut struggle to come to terms with their personal problems and missed opportunities. And kind of like being a through line I started to see with your selection of movies was, this might not be the main through line, was definitely a commentary on people's perceptions of America.
yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah, and these are all very American, aren't they?
Well, except for Gene Brodie is Scottish,
Yeah, but
but
it's
it is relevant to our times. I think
yeah,
if
yeah.
you
I
watch
guess
Gene Brodie today, it feels a little close to home.
that's funny that it feels American
Mm,
in a way. And I wonder,
the cult of
yeah,
personality we're all suffering through.
yeah. So yeah, and well, and Rev Road is, it's suburban discontent, which is its own whole category of things, and
Uh-huh.
that's something that I am drawn to, and I think it's because of its very Americanness. The invention of the suburbs, and then this feeling of, well, we're going to live in the suburbs and we are going to be appropriate, and everything is going to be, it's going to look right, And
Hmm.
but in a modest way. This isn't Maggie Smith being appropriate or grand or dressing right or looking right, but this is in a small way, like we're going to church every Sunday.
Hmm.
You're going to dress right, you're going to act right, and we are going to keep family secrets. And there will be family secrets. And it's just one of those things that speaks to me. I love it. And in Revolutionary Road, there's this couple comes and they're like a little artsier and a little quirkier than other people, but they're going to do this suburban thing. But then the thing is, they're not.
And they're so unhappy.
And they're so unhappy. But also, there is this attitude there. I brought up theory of mind earlier,
Hmm.
of that they think, well, we are interesting. These other people are suburban, boring, but we are interesting. It's like, oh no, actually, those other people also probably have interior lives as well.
Hmm.
Um, they maybe have thoughts, but that everyone is so intent on presenting this face.
Yeah, that was as I was trying to figure out what the main through line of this movie was, and hitting on that about a commentary on the American dream. The thing that really solidified it for me was David Harbour and Catherine Hahn. By the way, one of Catherine Hahn's best performances. I
Yeah,
love her to death. And if for no other reason, you should watch Revolutionary Road to see Catherine Hahn.
yeah,
But they play the best friends of the couple, Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. And when Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet start talking about they're going to leave Connecticut and move to Paris, their friends are distraught. They talk about it and they go, "Oh, it's so great! How fun for you!" And then the couples split up for the night. And Catherine Hahn and David Harbour look at each other and say, "What? They're not really going to do it, are they?"
yeah.
And
Like,
then it clicked for me, like these people are breaking out of the disillusion or being disillusioned from the American dream,
right.
and we're still stuck in it. If they get out, that will prove that we might not be right, that
Yeah,
this might not be the best possible life, that there can be more. And if they fail, that just reinforces that no, it doesn't get better than this. You can't really get out of this. Why would you?
yeah. Suburbia is where it's at.
The other side of that coin is um, Michael Shannon's character, John, who is the son of Kathy Bates' character, who has been in a mental institution. I mean, they're doing so much to downplay it and kind of hide anything that might be scandalous. And
Like
he
that
just
thing
shows
of,
up,
oh, you went to rehab? Oh, just don't tell anyone. Yeah,
right. He
yeah,
comes over for lunch or drinks at their house, and they kind of give some hint that they might be thinking about leaving the country. And he opens up because he is the other side of it. He is someone who has seen through the illusion of the American dream.
right.
Unfortunately, he's kind of gotten stuck in a situation where he can't act on it as freely as they could.
Right.
And this position is him being someone who's been to a mental institution, who's had 37 electroshock treatments. Like, oh, his brain must be fried. But
Right.
it's actually given him, well, I don't think it's given him, but the character has clarity that no
Yes.
one else around them has.
His character has seen the light, but in a thing where he's left the thing, found out that maybe it's not that great, but because it's harming him. These expectations, the silence, secrecy, and shame, and
Yes.
and the stigma, and he's like, why would anyone want to stay in this thing that is just judging me all the time? And then these two are they're thinking more expansively, and these are the only characters who are thinking outside of the suburb. And
And on the other hand,
Mhm.
and this movie really kind of shows how both being a homemaker and having a career, these two people do not have, or they have given up a life to
Yeah,
do these respective roles. They've fallen into these stereotypical positions as suburbanites, and that's their struggle, and that's why they're kind of mad at each other and going at each other. Because halfway through the movie, they say, "Hey, what if we just left all this?"
mhm,
And Leonardo DiCaprio's like, "No, well, we can't. It's my job." And but she says, "Hey, what if we did? We bring the kids, we go to Paris, and their eyes light up and they fall back in love again, kind of. Their relationship
Yeah.
kind of mends for a bit because there's hope, there's ambition, there's a roadmap into possibility instead of just a repetitious plan that's going to circle and spiral around itself over and over again until they die.
Ever, just forever.
Yeah.
And that's so discouraging. And part of the sadness of what this couple did is that they just gave it all up. They just said, well, I guess we have to do this thing. And then they forgot to, like, I don't know, go to a movie every once in a while, or, just like find the little pleasures. Like, sure, we can live a pleasant, smallish life. Like, life does not need to be grand to be pleasant. I guess that's the point of that book and movie, and so many of the other suburban discontents, is actually trying to shake people and say, don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying that the end of the road is preordained. There's no journey, there's no exploration, there's no hope of finding something for yourself that you didn't already know. Someone else is dictating everything.
Yeah.
And that kind of a same kind of feeling is where we start with The Fault in Our Stars.
Yeah.
And the next movie we're going to talk about from 2014, directed by Josh Boone, starring Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort. I really hope I said both those names correctly.
Yeah.
And it was written by John Green, who I'm a huge fan of. I followed John and his brother Hank on their YouTube show.
Yeah, because
I love them so much.
Yeah,
I'm a big nerd. The synopsis of Fault in Our Stars is: despite the tumor-shrinking medical miracle that has bought her a few years, Hazel has never been anything but terminal. Her final chapter inscribed upon diagnosis. But when a boy named Augustus Waters suddenly appears at her cancer support group, Hazel's story is about to be completely rewritten. And then the whole point of this was kind of saying she's in the doldrums of, this is my life, this is my routine, I have cancer, blah, 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 blah. And Augustus, even though other people are trying to engender some kind of positivity, Augustus shows up and just balks all of that and says, nah, we can do whatever.
Yeah. Well, also the big difference between him and everyone else is that he also has terminal cancer. So she's going to be listening, or, well, he has very serious cancer, I guess.
Yeah. In her support group, she's surrounded by other people who are trying to do positivity as well. They don't show up with a fucking cigarette.
Right.
Which, by the way, I got to say, kind of the reverse of Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I started off this movie already disliking Augustus Waters.
Oh, and
because what were we gonna say?
He's so special.
I know, he is kind of special, and you know why? Because that was me in high school.
Oh.
I was the kind of kid who would definitely pop up with the cigarette that I always have with me, but never light, because I have a big philosophical point to make with it.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of contrived performative things like that. I just sat there going, this insufferable kid.
And he is a little bit of a poser. But it's also, I mean, as with most posers, it's a defense. He is suffering so much. He is really having trouble. And
he's not pretentious and posing to be something elevated, like he's not acting like he's rich or acting like he's famous or something like that. He is trying to elevate his situation and rise above the sadness. So it is positivity in a different way, and but it's fun and it's whimsical. It's just also a paper thin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the thing with poor Hazel, she's got, for one thing, she just has cancer, and it is likely terminal, right? It's and I think that her parents,
well, they say that the treatment she's on works for almost nobody,
right?
That it is exceptionally exceptional,
right? That it's doing anything for her at all that's already remarkable. And what I see, and her mom is so fearful and is trying to like make it smaller and smaller, and it's like I identify and understand the mother Like, I recognize where she's coming from. And I'll tell you, this is the personal relationship I have with the film. Laura Dern was one of my clients when I was a private tutor in Los Angeles.
Oh,
And I taught her little boy and little girl. And when she was making this movie, her son was 11 and he was in 6th grade. And one of his very best friends had liver cancer. And he was out of school for a whole year for cancer treatment. And I also tutored him. And I'll tell you too that he is just fine. It's been 11 years.
yay.
He's doing great. But when this little fellow was going through it, and then Laura got that role, she was feeling it because she was friends with this mom. And so she really brought that to the production.
She did great. I really felt for her and rooted for her character. The supportive mom, I thought, where there were boundaries, there were things that she had to do to protect her child, but she was absolute. I knew she was going to come around to let her go to Amsterdam.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that she was going to be like, wait, what am I doing? And if you think about she knew it. She was friends with this woman who was going through it and who was trembling and shaking and was terrified for her baby. And children's cancers are often much worse. That's among your worst outcomes is children's cancers. And so then the other thing is that my mom and my nieces and I watched this movie together.
Oh, how was that?
And my nieces are my older niece is the same grade as Laura's older kid and the boy with cancer. And so I'm watching it with them and I'm looking at both of these girls and I'm thinking about this other little boy that I loved. And that I was there and held his hand. And I thought, what if this ever happened to them? And anyway, all 4 of us just were crying and crying at the end. It hit everybody so hard. And then what was so special too was that my nieces at the time were not big readers. And then because they loved the movie so much, they were motivated to read the book.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, well, and John Green,
yeah,
perfect young adult author.
Yeah.
That was another thing about this movie kind of helped shape my idea of how do you know a movie was likely based on a book.
Yeah. Think of Augustus as a character. He proclaims, he talks in paragraphs, which is, not something you get to do in movies.
Oh yeah. Augustus even has one quote while he's holding his unlit cigarette. He turns to Hazel and says, "Hush, I'm beginning a soliloquy here." I was like, who says that?
Yes. Well,
Jacin in 1998 says
that. Exactly. I was going to say, like, I can imagine a certain theater kid doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but I love that relationship where, you've got your disruptor and comes along and, in other things, it's the, what do they call it? The magical pixie girl. It's often the female role that comes and gets the man out of the rut or whatever. Mm-hmm. And here we let the girl be the curmudgeon and the boy be the magical pixie boy. And then, we needed him to come be the bad influence that turns out to be the good influence because it gets her to be alive. It's like, so when I was working with the kids with cancer, and their parents just were trembling for a whole year. The kids, the 2 kids I was working with were 11 and 14, and they just knew that they were very sick and they might die. And they were very level-headed about it. And I told that to some people at the time, and they said, well, they probably just don't really understand. And I said, no, I think they understand better than any of us. They really know. They really know how bad this is, and they can see their mom shaking. And they know how to use the internet. They've looked it up. They know what the numbers look like. And that is where those kids were. Both Hazel and Augustus knew I'm probably dying. Like, let's get real here, folks.
It's sort of, going back a little bit to the other movies we've talked about, the other books we've talked about, it's sort of positioning people with terminal illness can see through some of the illusions that the rest of us have.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we all know that there's a chance it might get cut short, and we all know that we definitely die someday, but it feels far enough out in the
We
future.
lie. Let's say, like, well, not anytime soon.
Right. And it's like, so we bop along, and, there's not an urgency. But then also, Augustus was the one who was like, there is urgency. I have a limited time, and I am going to do what I want. And then Hazel's like, I have a limited time, and I'm going to die, and that's the worst. And I'm sad, sad, sad. And that's a normal reaction. That's probably the more common one. It's probably pretty uncommon for someone to say, all right, I'm going to go live this up with the limited time I have. Yeah. Oh, it's so deep and charming and real, and it's worth looking at. And it's, and it's the cautionary tale of, like, we all have limited time. Get moving. So same as the suburban discontent genre. Get moving. I feel like John Green definitely knows how to write for film. Like, his book is a very easy translation. He is going to be one, if he chooses to, he can write lots of things that will be filmed. And some of it is because, he's done the podcasting and stuff. So he knows what goes into it and what's going to fly and what's not going to fly. And I get the feeling that he is now writing with that in mind.
Earlier we talked about, like, what could be the through line. I presumed early on what it might be, but did you have any kind of consistent theme that you saw that sort of tied all 5 of these movies together?
Well, I feel like I know what you're thinking here now, and I think it's right on. It's like, yeah, let's be alive. Let's live it. Live the life that we've got. I'll tell you what I was actually trying to do was, I had my longer list, and I was trying to hit different qualities. So it was that I was like, okay, well, let's only do one suburban discontent, because I could do a whole show of just that. And then I wanted to highlight the thing of the author disagreeing with John Irving. And then I was thinking the Prime of Misc Brodie was so right on with how it lined up with the book.
Right.
And then The Fault in Our Stars was because of how absolutely personally I felt watching that movie. That just, it was so beautifully done, and it could have been just a movie, and it isn't.
That's great. I love finding movies that become more than that, or books like when I was a kid, books that become this personal world.
Yeah.
But I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about adaptations of books to film. I was really excited to share this with you, and it's been so much fun, Elise.
Oh, this really was fun. Thanks for having me on your show.
I really want everyone to go check out, if you're in Portland, the Rose City Book Pub over on Northeast Fremont. How else can people find out what's going on at the pub?
Oh, we've got a up-to-date event calendar, rosecitybookpub.com/events. And you check that in advance in case you're hoping to come for a quiet night. It might be a rowdy night.
And I'll put all those links in the description under this video. Also, you can check out all the movies we've talked about. I'm going to make a special letterbox list of just films we talked about in this episode, so you can check those out and watch them as well. You can also find Miscellaneous Film Festival podcast on Facebook. You can check out our page. Every time I'm researching movies for these episodes, I will put links to articles I find or videos behind the scenes documentaries on that Facebook page. Otherwise, thank you again, Elise, and everyone listening. Thank you for listening, and have a great day. Yep.
Yeah.
I was considering, I was going to invite you, should we do the entire episode as if we're both Jacin and Brodie? That won't get obnoxious at all. I
would have come as Owen Meany.